My ex-wife still misses me, but her aim is getting better. But her aim is getting better. You see, it's funny because marriage is terrible. Less than 1 minute until it starts, everybody. How are y'all doing today? Having a good Sunday? Radical. We will have Q&A at the end, just to make sure to give you guys some time to think about it. But we still got 1 or 2 people shuffling in, but since we've got like 30 seconds to go, I might as well just start going. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ponies and Pantones 2, even more art and design of Friendship is Magic. Behold, it's me. Yes, I'm Dan, but you might know me better as Kefka Floyd. To give you an idea of my background, I'm a professional designer, been doing in the business for about 16 years. I have an art degree, fine arts, concentration in graphic design. Currently work for an OEM in the printing industry, making workflow software. So people who make plates and things like that for printing presses, that's what I do. Before my current job, I worked in print production, as well as a staff and freelance designer for other people. I'm also a professional photographer. You might know me here as a fan artist. I've got stuff here at the show. You might have seen some of my things. You might even be wearing one of my t-shirts. That's great. I have a table here at the show. It's E15. Please come by and buy my stuff. You might also know my color guides that I've put together for the main 6 and other things for fan artists to use. I'm also the staff designer for Bronies for Good, charity organization. Did their logo, a bunch of other stuff for them. I also helmed the Bound Together comic anthology project, which some of you guys might have donated to last year and gotten some books. And those are some things you might know me from. But enough about me. What we're really here to talk about is the art direction and design of Friendship is Magic. Hooray! Yep. Now, as part of this, we have to remember where ponies came from. To understand why Friendship is Magic looks the way it does, we need to look at its goals, influences, and past. As you all know, thousands of days ago, before ponies as you knew them, there was the previous generations of pony, from the original 1980s Gen 1 toys all the way to Gen 3 in the 90s and aughts. Pony has its own design evolution that brought us to today. Nothing is created in a vacuum. All of these previous generations have influenced the creation that you watch today. Without them, none of you would be sitting here. So show your respect. Some of you might remember these guys, Gen 1s. Yeah, see, we've got some good fans in here. Gen 1s was the first generation. Everybody knows them. They're, aside from Gen 4, the most iconic generation of the show. It's because in the 80s, when everybody started, we had Ponies, Transformers, and G.I. Joe, forming the Hasbro triumvirate of toy franchises. It laid the groundwork for all of the future generations, from characters to color schemes to story elements, as well as toy packaging. Featuring the Rainbow of Light as a very prominent design element, it linked it to the show because obviously that was a primary element in the show. It's very 80s, as you can see, you know, very pastel, but not necessarily very gendered. We'll get into that into the future. But, you know, it's very, the package design was very similar to what you would get for, say, G.I. Joe's. It was a cardboard card that had a piece of plastic glued onto it, so it was very easy for a kid to open. You just get it, very easy to see on a shelf, easy to stock. That was one of Hasbro's big action figure / toy packaging paradigms of the 1980s. Next, we have the lesser-known Generation 2 toys, not to be confused with what people erroneously think as Generation 2, the TV show My Little Pony Tales, which was technically part of Generation 1. If you didn't know that, you'll learn something today. The Gen 2 toys were a little different. You know, they had longer legs, they were more horse-like rather than, you know, the chubby pony design that we got in the first round of toys. Still using the same basic package design of the action figure pull it apart, but now we've gone to an even bigger Rainbow of Light, a newer logo, and this pony logo would stay around for a little while. Once Gen 2 was done, we move into Gen 3, which was the real big comeback for My Little Pony. The franchise had been kind of, I wouldn't say it went away, but it had, it had kind of went down for a few years, but they decided to do a new toy range and bring it back. At this point, toy packaging had started to become a little more gendered. You notice that we've got primarily pink as our color of choice here. We got a new logo, which, if you look at it, is a very clear basis for the My Little Pony logo of today. And they're still shelfable designs. They can still be hung on a little rod off the shelf. They didn't really start going into box packaging until they did bigger play sets. And then with Gen 4, actually this is not Gen 4, this is Gen 3.5. These are the ones that people are like, whoa. I mean, some people like them. I do not begrudge people if they like it. But you can clearly see that Gen 3.5, as we go forward, actually laid a lot of the groundwork for the design language that we would see in Gen 4. The logo got an update. We've got our now familiar magenta pink colors that we're doing for the logo. They're doing I don't really know the right term as to what the designer would have called it, but we're doing more of the stair-step gradient design with the way that the looping goes in the packaging. Bringing it up to Gen 4, they decided to experiment a little more. The basic Gen 4 packaging was not all that different from the Gen 3 packaging. They just changed the logo, changed some of the fonts, and went on their way. But Gen 4 has allowed them to do a little more experimenting with the packaging. Like every theme that they've done with Gen 4, they've done different color combinations. They've done different kinds of packaging. Like they've moved away from the peel-apart packaging to more of a box style that either can be put on a shelf, or if a retailer really wants to, they can stick a little hook on it and put it on the hook display. Going through all these different generations, you can see the clear progression that we have of the style of packaging for the toys. And this stuff influences the show too, because this very wispy, cloudy things appeared in a lot of the show marketing material. And, with all the various designs that we got in Gen 4, with the Power Ponies, for example, gave them a great opportunity to do new logos, new color combinations, So as far as the toys go, why did we look through toys? It's because at the end of the day, Ponies, it's a show that's designed to sell toys. And in order to sell toys and do a show, we have to build an aesthetic, okay? And with Gen 4, they really decided to go a different way. There were people working on some, interim, kind of like a refinement of the Gen 3.5 design. One of those designers, we'll talk about her later, actually wound up working on Gen 4 and designing a lot of your favorite characters in Gen 4. But what makes Friendship is Magic what it is in terms of art direction stem from the minds of some very important people. You probably know some of your names. You might not know some of them, but hopefully I'll introduce you to some of them going on. Please forgive me if I've forgotten anyone. I actually know there might be some people here. Sorry. The very first one, Miss Faust. Lauren, of course, had the idea. She started it. She birthed the main six. She designed all of them. She had considerable sway over the general appearance of the world of Equestria. Her hands have touched almost every design decision in Season 1 and Season 2. The reason the show looks a lot why it does is because of her. Even if she didn't design something directly, she had pages and pages of notes to say, hey, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. Basically, Lauren is why Gen 4 is, for the most part, the way it is. Even though she's not here on the staff anymore, her presence is still greatly felt. Next, Mr. Jason Thiessen, who unfortunately could not make it to the show. He is here with us in spirit, though. Jason was the primary director of the show for the first 4 seasons. He did a lot on the animation side to determine how things moved, how things looked. And his career in animation goes back a long way. He's a veteran of the Vancouver animation industry. He worked on several of those mid-aughts cartoons you might have seen. Like, how many of you guys know Puka? Nobody raising their hands? Oh, well, we got one guy, the one guy who remembers Puka. He was director on that. You know, a lot of DHX shows he's had his fingers in. He's made a lot of decisions, again, that have had an impact on how the show animates. And even doing things like the felt pinky scene in Feeling Pinky, I think it was Feeling Pinky Keen? I can't remember what episode that was. A Friend Indeed, that was it. And that was one of my favorite bits in the show, still is. Jason did it entirely in his basement along with his wife. Now that's dedication. Now we're going to get into some people who've had some more important things to do on background processes of the show that you might not heard about but are still very important. A fellow like Rid Sorensen. Rid was the art director on the show for season 1 and 2. He worked along with Lauren to design backgrounds, props, general aesthetics, things like that. The character designers, the background designers, the color artists all reported to him, and he acted as a liaison between Lauren and all them when Lauren might have been too busy or something else like that. Next, character designers. Everybody loves character designers. Just two here I'm featuring Rebecca Dart, who now is the art director on the show for season 5 and onwards. She designed Queen Chrysalis, amongst some of your other favorite ponies. Nicole Gauss, also character designer, did some other characters whose names I'm not remembering at the moment. Then we've got background artists, guys like Phil Caesar and Dave Dunnett. These guys have been working on backgrounds since season 1 of the show. Dave isn't around anymore. He worked on some things with Lauren to get things going through, but the vast majority of backgrounds are done by Phil Caesar. And then we've got various contributors. So basically, these are some names that we've got here for various people. We've got Robin Mitchell, Mike Gilbert. They are general designers for the show. They do props and things like that. Jeff Manson, he's the guy who does the location color. So let's say if something, let's say you've got Ponyville during the daytime or the evening. They have different color schemes. So you have to develop all those. It's his job. Ted Wilson, Flash Props. Paul Rudish, a guy who you might know from some Cartoon Network shows, worked with Lauren to do development artwork for the show. Kelly DeVries and Alexandra Jones, color artists. They're people who determine what color goes where. And of course, Mr. Craig McCracken, Lauren's husband, who you might know from the Powerpuff Girls, Wander Over Yonder, Fosters. He helped Lauren out with various things like helping to design Discord, you know, and many more of people whose names I'm sure I can't remember, but you'll always see at the end of every show. If I've forgotten anybody who's important, I'm sorry. So now that you have some information and some background, you're probably going to ask yourself, why does design matter and what makes it work? Well, we have to really look at the core of the show, which is the show and toys. And in order to get people to watch the show and people to buy toys, there's a lot of people you have to please. And as a designer, you're going to have to maybe fight a little bit to not necessarily please these people all the time. But the primary one that we always make sure is the most important is the target demographic, okay? Girls aged 8 to 12, and maybe a little younger, maybe a little older, is and will probably always be the primary demographic of the show. And as people who work on the show know, you can't forget that. That is who you are designing for primarily. Even though there is universal appeal amongst humans for equine bonding, you know, everybody, well, not everybody, but most of the people I've talked to about the show say a lot of the appeal is, it's because they horsies. Everybody loves horses, right? Who doesn't like horses? You know? So that's a big thing for a fan of all ages. And My Little Pony has over 30 years of memory and brand equity built up. People who are my age are buying the stuff for the children in their lives, their own children, their nieces. You know, that's who Hasbro is trying to get people involved with. That doesn't mean that obviously other people are not part of people that they'd want to spend money on, but at the end of the day, a lot of the design decisions are based on this core demographic. Next, we have to worry about parents and retailers. And this picture here is something that I've talked about before in the past, but let me just put a question out here. How many of you have heard about the concept of the pink aisle? I see a lot of hands going up. That means a lot of you have been paying attention to the news and your gender studies. So if you've been to some, they shall remain nameless, department stores and other places lately, you might notice that there's a lot of gendering going on. You've got a pink aisle for girls and a blue aisle for boys. It wasn't always this way, but as, if you went through the 80s and the 90s and the aughts, retailers did this so that they could essentially maximize their profits, make it easy for people to say, oh, we have a daughter, let's buy her a girl toy. But that's not necessarily what she might want. She might say, well, I don't care if it's a girl toy. I want to play with G.I. Joes. Or a little boy might want to have My Little Pony. Who cares? But trying to get those people to understand that is a very difficult thing. So as you saw when we went through all that toy packaging earlier, and you saw the gradual change into how it all started to look pink, this is why. Fortunately, some retailers are starting to make this go away. Target, for example. I believe as of last year, they eliminated gendered aisles in their stores, and they're starting to make that go away. But slowly but surely, that stuff will go away. But that is why those boxes are all that pink. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad packaging. Pink is a great color. I love pink. But, when it's being used in such a way, we have to be a little more cognizant of that. We'll get back to that later. Another people you have to please, the network. Everybody knows the network. You have to do things when you design so that they can be used in TV promos, movie promos for next year, so on and so forth. A lot of the design decisions made in the show were based on ease of production. So we're going to talk about production of the show and how the artwork relates to that. The primary thing about, at least in my belief, of this show that makes it work so well is that it has recognizable, versatile characters, okay? This is not just for Gen 4, by the way. This goes all the way back to Gen 1. This is, my opinion, why this franchise has such staying power. The people behind it had put together a lot of very compelling characters. And there are characters from 30 years ago who are still showing up in the show. That's a big deal. That just shows how strong those designs are. So your question might be, how do we make characters that look that way? Well, there's a few tests that animators and maybe writers and designers might like to use. Here's a very basic one, the silhouette test. If any of you done animation or been in character design or things like that? Sorry if I missed any of your hands, but I didn't see anybody. So, oh, we got somebody, hooray. So one thing to keep in mind that this show does very well is that characters should have a strong silhouette. You should be able to easily identify a character just by seeing their silhouette. We've got the main 6 up there. I bet all of you can easily identify who is what just by looking at that. There's no colors, no nothing. On the other hand, the silhouettes also enable you to kind of see how the characters look and how they might behave. You can see how Rarity carries herself, for example. You can see she has a very elegant pose. Rainbow Dash is flying. Pinkie Pie's like, hooray, party, So that's the kind of stuff where when you're putting a character together, all those designers on that show, that's what they work on. They have to make sure they can read really well. But it's not just about an art style thing, it's about a writing thing. And this is my other favorite test for characters, the Plinkett test. How many of you know Red Letter Media? We got some Red Letter Media fans there. Mr. Plinkett is the reviewer who you might know from Red Letter Media, at least from a couple years ago. And what you call the Plinkett test is describe a character without using any of their appearance. You cannot use any traits of how they look to describe them. For example, Rarity, my favorite pony. She's a fussy, prissy artist who demands perfection from her friends and others, but she is not above being dramatic despite her endless wellspring of generosity. That is Rarity's character in a nutshell. But we didn't say, oh, she's white with, purple curly hair. That's the kind of stuff you have to think about when designing characters. So you've designed your characters. What you have to do next is actually make a show. What they do is they do it in Flash. Now, I know everybody here should hopefully know what Flash is. Bringing security vulnerabilities to your computer and being generally painful to use. But it's actually used across a variety of things. And one thing it's used in is animation production. Now, times have changed. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when you thought about Flash, you might have said, oh, Flash, that's not good. And, people might be thinking of something like this. Yeah, see? So, but that, just because Flash is used for that, and in perhaps bad ways, doesn't mean that it can't be used in good ways. So we have to ask ourselves, why does Ponies use Flash? Well, the reason why it uses Flash is because 2D animation isn't really done, and kind of sad in my opinion, on ink and paint and cells anymore. It's done on a computer. And in computers, there's several things you can use to design it. You can use Flash, Toon Boom, a couple other programs, you could use to do it. But DHX primarily uses Flash. You might say to yourself, I thought Flash was bad. Wrong. Flash can be good. Okay? And the reason why it can be good is that it's a tool. A tool is only as good as those using it. And if you want to use it in a cheap way, you can do so like Johnny Test. But we don't blame pencils for being poor tools when someone is unskilled with them, after all. Only a bad carpenter blames his hammers. Okay? So what we have to do is realize, how can we go through and use the limitations of our medium, Flash, to our benefit? If you look at a lot of ponies, you might notice that they are shaped in what we like to call the tube and bean design. Because if you look at it, a pony is really just a series of tubes attached to a bean. And if you looked at their skeleton, you would see that it's really that, a skeleton. You'll see there's various ovals and lines that connect together to form, like they have an arm joint or a leg joint. Each of those things are part of the puppet of the model. And one of DHX's advantages is that they've done a lot of custom development in their software to make that happen. It's not just, oh, I'll just go draw a pretty picture over and over again. It's not how it's done anymore. You have to go and rig them and tell them how to move in a certain way. And the secret sauce of ponies is that the people who are doing it, the guys and gals up in Vancouver, are really darn good at doing it. But you might say, well, okay, what are the advantages of Flash? Well, one of the advantages of Flash is that because you can use something over and over again, once you've done it, you've essentially banked it. That's one of the advantages of the show. When all main 6 were designed, they said, well, we're going to try to conserve it. We'll give them all the same body shape, so when we do an animation for one, we can use that same animation or facial expression for another. We can change their hair. It reduces the amount of time it takes to get something to market. That's how you minimize the downsides of Flash, which is that, some people might call the paper doll effect. If you can get the basics done, you can have somebody go and hand tweak it later on to make it look better. So what we're going to talk about next is basically the evolution of the look of the show. And, the show's been on the air for 6 seasons now, and that's a long time for a television show. If you think about it, the show came out at the end of 2010. That could be a different place for a lot of you guys. For younger kids, you might have been in grade school, now you're in middle school. You might have been in college, now you've got a job. You've changed, and so has the show. So what they've done, what I've got here is how it's changed over the years. Season 1 laid the groundwork. Everybody remembers Season 1. A lot of Flash gradients, a lot of crazy facial expressions. Okay? It was all 26 episodes done in almost the span of a year. Think about that. That's a lot of stuff to get through. So once they got the basics down, in Season 2, they moved on to improving their lighting, expression, and staging. So everybody remembers in Season 1, Princess Celestia, she had her front-on look. It looked a little odd. Well, Season 2, they went back and fixed that. Now Princess Celestia has more angles to her, so she can show up more in the show and do different things. They had new plugins that let them do new lighting effects, okay? So on and so forth. In Season 3, they improved texture and detail. If you look at the backgrounds in Season 3, for example, you'll notice that they're not just simple gradients anymore. They have extra brush strokes, they have texturing, they have more elements. With more powerful computers, they can afford to put more items on the stage. In Season 4, the big improvement was the cinematography. Again, with new effects, they were able to do things like depth of field, where if you look at this screenshot here, for example, Sweetie Belle is in the front of the depth of field. She's out of focus. So that allows them to mimic cinematic camera effects, which they couldn't really do in prior seasons because they didn't have the tech to do it. So you can see all of this stuff is iterating over and over to improve the aesthetic of the show. In season 5, they went worldwide. We're not just limited to Ponyville and Canada anymore. We've gone to Manhattan. We've gone to the name of Starlight Glimmers Town that I can't remember. You know, they went to Griffinstone, all these various places that they had to do all sorts of new design work for. And a lot of it was, in terms of both backgrounds and new ponies and characters, really impressive. But you couldn't get to season 5 without doing all of that stuff first. As they would say, we stand upon the shoulders of giants. So to talk a little bit more about how things work in the show, and to keep it in fact with art, when you're designing something, there's several key things you should keep in mind. We call these the 6 elements of design. Just so happens we have 6 elements of harmony. Who'da thunk, right? You know? So line, color, shape, texture, space, and form. An artist and designer will use these things to construct their scene, to design their characters, to influence how you feel about it. You know, color. This show has a great use of color. We'll go into that in a little bit. You know, the way you use color can influence how somebody feels about something. Warm colors means hot. Cool colors like blue and purple mean cold. They have different things that they evoke. Purple means royalty. You know, rarity is purple and white. She looks like a king's robe. That sort of thing. That's what they're trying to do, you know. Excuse me. You know, other things designers do to play with you is they use form and space. For example, did you guys know that Fluttershy's hair forms a heart? Isn't that sweet? You know, designers do that thing, you know, because, to once again borrow from Mr. Plinkett, you didn't notice it, but your brain did. You know, you might not immediately recognize that that's a heart, but you make these little mental connections that say, oh, someday you might just say, it's a heart. One big thing about the show is colors. Who here likes colors? Everybody likes colors. People know me because of colors. The color choices that people make influence how they feel about the show. It's one of the most visible things you can do. It's also something I know the most about, whatever. So here's a quiz for everybody. What color is Princess Celestia? I'm hearing a lot of whites and I'm hearing a lot of pinks. Whoever said pink is correct. Princess Celestia is not white. And in fact, a lot of the characters that you might think are white are in fact not white at all. For example, you've got the family Rarity. All 3 of them are different colors. They are not pink. They're not pink. They are not white. Rarity is light gray. She's more of a cool gray. Sweetie Belle is a warm gray. Her father is a more neutral gray. Okay? The little scaredy pony, she is also not white. She is gray. Vinyl Scratch is not white. She is actually a very light yellow color, believe it or not. You know, these are the ways that designers can visually separate characters. You could have all of these characters in one scene, and you would easily be able to tell them apart even if they were walking in front of each other. Now, that's not to say that they don't use white ponies in the show, because there are white ponies, like Prince Blueblood, that jerk. You know, Nurse Redheart, Pip, Fancy Pants, Fleur, they are all white. But the reason why they don't quite look white is a item called false color. If you notice, all of their stroke colors are different colors, and that influences how you perceive them. Look at Pip, for example. Because he has that thick brown stroke, your eyes kind of look at him and say, okay, yeah, he's kind of brown, even though his fill color is technically pure white. The same thing goes with Fleur and Fancy Pants. Fleur has a blue stroke, she has a pink stroke. You look at them and say, okay, yeah, he's kind of blue, she's kind of pink. But they're not. They are white. You've learned something today. Something else that they like to do amongst the show is reusing colors. If you look at the main 6, you'll notice that they actually share a lot of similar colors. For example, Applejack and Fluttershy, even though the color management on this is a little wrong, but trust me on this, Applejack's hair and Fluttershy's body are the same color. Fluttershy's hair and Pinkie Pie's body are the same color. Rainbow Dash's rainbow uses colors that are picked from all different ponies, you know? That's how they keep these things looking visually harmonious. If you can choose a color palette that works across multiple things, well, A, that means you're not going to have to deal with so many conflicting colors. B, it'll reduce your printing costs. But it also means that when people will notice those things in their brain. They'll say, oh yeah, they're very similar. But because they put different colors next to each other, like we saw before, it creates a different appeal. Like you might not immediately think that Pinky's body and Fluttershy's hair have the same color, but when you look at it, you're like, they do. Other things that are important in the art and design are the pony comics. Who here has read the pony comics? Woo! All right. We've got several pony comic artists here at the show. You should go at the table and talk to them. And one thing that they had to do with the comics is not the same as animation. You don't have to worry about keeping things maybe a little less detailed in animation, whereas in comics you can go nuts. For example, one of my favorite spreads was from issue number 9, where we had Big Mac and Fleetfoot. And Fleetfoot had her great dream about whisking Big Mac away. You can't really do that in the show. You can have an artist like Andy Price who gets a whole 22-page book penciled and inked in about 2 weeks. And that was back when he first started doing it, and I bet he might even be a little faster at it now. Just think about that. Instead of having to do half an hour worth of show, you've got 22 pages. You can do amazing things like put in a lot of detail. You can do hand lettering, which you can see lots of hand lettering all through that. So one topic I did want to talk about is your OC stinks, or common fan mistakes. Now, how many of you have OCs? Okay, that's a lot of OCs. I do not have an OC, believe it or not. Somebody's very disappointed he doesn't have an OC. But just for this show, I designed an OC just for you. Look at him. Isn't he great? Oh boy, some people are really having some serious allergic reactions to this OC. A lot of people have run into Donut Steele in their lives. And poor Donut Steele, he's kind of got a bad rep. I hear he's actually a very kind and gentle guy, but everybody always thinks he's very grim and dark because he's black and red. And why do people pick black and red? Believe it or not, black and red actually go really well together. It's a great combination for cars. Red car with black stripes. Samus Aran with the Phazon suit in Metroid Prime 1, And the reason why is because it's the first thing people go to. It becomes a cliche. So what makes success for making a OC for doing something like that? One example I like to use is Egophiliac. Everybody here knows Egophiliac, right? She did Moonstuck, Slice of Life. She does all sorts of other cool things. And the reason why she does such great designs is that, A, she bases a lot of things on Gen 1 ponies, which is a good idea as always. Some of these are Gen 1 ponies, like Fizzy and Gusty and Minty, But one thing you can do to improve the design of your OC is to look at other people's OCs and see what makes them look visually appealing. Look at the background characters in the show. You'll notice that they tend to have a contrast. Like take Gusty, for example. She's all green, but she's a very light green and dark green. It makes it very easy to read her. They don't use conflicting color choices. Like, say, you can use red and green, but if you use them in very big areas, they tend to conflict a little bit, even though they are opposite of each other on the color wheel. Those are some things you should do. Look at other people's stuff, see what works for them. And last, before we get to Q&A, people always wanted to know about fonts. People always ask me stuff about that, so I'll figure I'll save a couple questions. Unfortunately, because I'm not on my laptop for a variety of reasons, the fonts will not come out properly. I apologize. But if you're interested in designing pony things, there are some fonts out there that you can use and know. The first one, which is not going to show up properly, is Generation B. Generation B is the actual font used in the My Little Pony logo and on the toy boxes. It is not Celestia Medium. It's not Celestia Redux. If you want to use the actual genuine article, you want to use Generation B, which you can purchase for a low licensing fee of, I believe, $20. Next one is Woodrow. Woodrow is the font, again, you can't see it here, I apologize. Woodrow is the font that's used for all the title cards of the show. So after it goes to, friends, and you get to see all of the, credits at the front of the show, they use that. Next, Gill Sands, used on toy boxes. Ariel Black, which is used in the ending credits of the show. And last but not least, Stovetop. Stovetop is a tertiary font used in toy packaging, but also in Equestria Girls. So if people are wondering what the Equestria Girls font is, it's Stovetop. Now you know. And if you are interested in more art and design of Friendship is Magic, I would highly recommend that this book came out early this year, late last year, The Art of Equestria. It was written by Mary Jane Begin, who did some of the children's books for ponies. I know her. She is a Rhode Island native. She is very great. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in more examples of concept art and production art from the show, that you buy this book. And there are people here in the vendor hall, I believe, who are selling that book. So you should be able to go and get it if you are interested. Yes, it is shiny. It has a metallic color on it. So last but not least, we have Q&A until the end of the panel. So if you guys want to ask a question, there is a microphone up there that our lovely friend, whose name I've already forgotten, I'm sorry, is manning. And you can come up and ask me questions, and hopefully I can answer them. So go nuts. Excuse me.
Hi.
Hello.
Like with the color designs of like the main six or any character period, like how do they get like that specific color? Is it just like kind of random? Is like
Nope, not random at all. What a designer usually does is they have books, and in these books they have swatches and color combinations. So when they decide, well, I want to do a yellow, they would go through and flip through their yellows, and these would correspond to colors in a color guide. And they'd say, okay, I've picked Pantone 100 as my yellow. Pantone 100 is coincidentally Fluttershy's yellow color. You know, it's also Applejack's hair color. So that's how they would go through, and those colors are part of a standardized system. So you can say, oh, I'm doing a toy. You know, say, I need Pantone 100 for this toy. The person who is making the dyes will know exactly what color to use because you're sticking to a standard system.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Next.
I pretty much discovered everything by myself by accident.
Okay.
But one item that I don't think you ever explained, if you decide you want to do animation,
Yep.
what's like perhaps you might get like a cease and desist if it gets like too close to the show, and you never talked about
I
it.
didn't really. I touch on that sometimes in vendor panels. I did not touch on it here, but that is a good question in terms of, you know, in my opinion, it's. I mean, at the end of the day, you're playing in somebody else's playground. They have the right to tell you to leave, and you know. In my opinion, the easiest way to get a cease and desist is to do something that matches the show exactly. If you do that, you are playing with fire. If you do your own style and you do something that's different, odds are it'll be less. You know, it's different with, you know, PMVs and things like that where they're using, you know, clips of the show and things like that. But if you want to avoid a C&D, A, don't do ponies. But B, try to do it in your own style. I know some people really want to do it in the show style, and that's okay. But you have to know that if you get too popular or if you do something that's not nice, you might get a nasty letter in your door.
Because my ideas are basically so like different from the show.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty safe.
Well, I mean, you could always come by my table, you know, take a card, show me. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you whether it'll do anything or not, but we can certainly show it to you if you like.
Okay.
Thank you. I do not speak for Hasbro. I'm just some random guy.
So I like the panel. I couldn't help but notice that you talked about the design for the toys and the design for the characters, almost as if they were independent of each other.
Oh, not really. I mean, I just felt that, you know, it started as a toy thing. The toy thing is the primary mover of the franchise. You know, at the end of the day, it is about toys. But in some cases, there are considerations you have to make when you're doing something for a toy versus doing something for the show. Like, it's a lot easier to put a background character in the show than there is to make a toy, because when there's a toy, there's minimum quantities you have to do. You have to do research to see if people actually want to buy it or not. And some toys, you know, they may not work as toys, and you know, it's more of a context thing, you know, to make sure that, you know, people knew where things were coming from. But they both influence each other. You know, they might want to do a toy thing in the show, which they've done, like the Royal Wedding, for example. Big toy thing. They wanted it to be in the show. They worked together. They made it work, and it worked out pretty well. Sometimes they take stuff that's in the show and make toys out of it. You know, but there might be... I thought it was funny that they finally released a, you know, library toy set a season after the library was destroyed.
Spoilers.
Look, you know, if you're here, you know what happened. Thank you.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you because I didn't realize that you were the one who had done the pony color guides. But
thank you.
I have used those multiple times trying to build like Lego sculptures of ponies, and that's, you know, those have been very helpful because, you know, Lego has its own limited color palette, and trying to find the ones that best match the actual genuine colors used for the show is having those handy is a huge boon.
Thank you.
But secondly, my real question is just, you know, when you were showing the picture of the pink aisle, I wanted to, you know, from a design perspective, you know, it's a wonder that things got to the stage it did, because just the picture you showed, every single item on the shelf.
To be fair, they did put a filter on that.
Okay.
But, you know, all it takes is just, you know, go into Walmart, go to the toy section, you know, and you'll see it, you know. I'm not sure if you could put an antitrust on that or not, but I think it's because I think what happened first is the toy packaging, you know, people like Hasbro, like Mattel, decided to say, hey, we'll do pink packaging. That's what they decided to do. And then the retailers saw that and said, hey, let's go make boys and girls, and kind of do that. And, you know, if you look at a lot of old toy packaging from like the 70s, you'll notice not a lot of gendering going on. Like, compare the Easy Bake Oven of the 1970s versus the Easy Bake Oven of today. A couple years ago, you guys might have heard about the girl who wrote into Hasbro saying her little brother wanted an Easy Bake Oven, but, you know, he was kind of turned off because the box was implying that, you know, he could not enjoy it. And, you know, they were probably losing sales because of that. So they started making that stuff a little more gender neutral. You know, that stuff, if you speak up about it and say something, it might start changing things. Yeah. You know, in my opinion, I mean, there's nothing wrong with pink as a packaging color. I really like pink. You know, it's a great color. It works on a lot of things, you know, but unfortunately, people do sometimes use those things, I won't say for evil, but I will say for purposes I do not approve of.
Well, it was just interesting because, you know, comparatively, like, even looking at the Generation 4 packaging, you know, they have branched out a lot.
Yes,
from,
they have.
You know, using purple or black and white or dark blue or lots of different colors, and even, you know, depending on what sub-brand of My Little Pony it is.
Yeah, like every year they have a new theme, you know, and each theme does different things. Like, I really like the Rainbow Power boxes. I don't know about you guys, but I thought those ones were really slick looking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shout out to the guy in the Steven shirt.
Thanks.
By Leakfish.
Hi.
Hello.
Is there a particular reason why, for example, Fleetfoot's eyes are a different color in the comics than they are in the show? Is it a result of a like animation versus print thing?
Well, I don't want to speak too much for the lady who does the coloring of comics. Her name is Heather Breckel. She's an She's an excellent colorist. She's a good friend of mine. You know, sometimes what happens is in the show, the way that they're colored is they're like a gradient, and they go from one to another. And in a lot of cases, sometimes you don't have the reference for those certain ones. You might be given, you might be given something, and you say, okay, oh, here's the reference, here's what I'm going to use. You know, it's not because, you know, malice or anything. It's because sometimes that's what you're given, or sometimes the artist says, hey, you know, this looks good. I wasn't given anything. I'll make the decision that I think is correct. You know, it's not an uncommon thing to have happen. A lot of times, if you notice a difference like that, it's either unintentional or it was a case where that pony might have appeared in a comic before they had a bigger appearance in the show. And even sometimes in the show, they can't keep certain things straight. You know, that's because this stuff is a production. You know, mistakes happen, and it's not out of malice. It's because people have deadlines to meet, and sometimes you have to ship a product. You know, great artists ship, in the words of Steve Jobs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I want to say that comic was like a mid-2013 comic. Yeah, she was only like an incidental pony before that. Yep. Next.
What is your favorite color?
I better watch out or I'll be ejected off the stage. Favorite shade. Okay. I really do like the color that's on my car. It's what Mazda calls gunmetal blue. In the sun, it's like this very nice greenish blue color. In the shade, it turns more to a purplish blue. You know, I had a choice. I could pick that or I could pick celestial blue. And celestial blue is this very obnoxious, very bright neon blue. It's actually very similar to the blue on your shirt. And between those two, I'm more of a subtle guy, you know. I mean, there's something to be said for bright, obnoxious colors in some cases, but I'm always up for a good blue. You know, I'm wearing a blue shirt.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this isn't something he really covered, but the reason why I said shade him, because as he's an artist, when people give commissions, they often say, this is the color of my character. That is incorrect. You want to tell the artist the shade, because trust me, there are many blues, many reds,
Exactly.
many yellows. Yeah, I have like.
That's why we went through that. We
Yes.
went through, there's many shades of white.
My character is specifically charcoal gray.
See? Perfect. You're very helpful. Hello.
Hello. So you talked a little bit about the different evolution between each season of
Yep.
what they brought in for the different characters and for everything. What do you think there's going to be moving forward as for a new element that applies to the show? And what do you think? How do you think that might factor in for keeping with their general design? Where do you think they will draw the line of advancement?
Well, I mean, we do have the movie coming up, and the movie is actually not going to be animated in Flash. It's going to be done in Toon Boom, which I think will influence some of their design decisions. The big thing that they add in depth of field and things like that. It's tough to say. I would say that even if you look in season 6, like you look at the difference in how they render, say, Zikora's hut in season 1 versus season 6. Just the difference. It's like it's two different places because of just the overall design differences that they've put into it. I think what they would do in the show is hard to say.
Do you think they'll broaden the cinematography application?
Well, I mean, they've certainly done a lot with depth of field and various lighting. I think the main thing they can still improve on is lighting in the show. In some cases, like if you compare like season 3 lighting to season 5 lighting, you can see, the difference in how they render it. It's not just, soft shadows anymore. They're starting to do some other things with it. The problem is that, those characters were designed to look in a certain way. They would have to redesign them to change them up, a little bit. And I don't think they're going to do that until Gen 5. And what we get for Gen 5 will be very interesting. I'm certainly interested in what they would do with it. I just like it. I hope they would do more of the abstractish things that they've done. Like during the Smile song, for example. One of my favorite bits is all of a sudden it just goes to that, cardboard cutout look where Pinky is, she's hopping along. I mean, it's one of my, when I saw that, it's one of those, it blew my mind moments, and they do those every once in a while on the show, like when they do live action Gummy, that also one of those, I would like them to do more of that, the felt Pinky. On the other hand, if they do it too much, it kind of makes it lose the specialness, but every couple times a season, they bring out something new like that, and if they can keep doing that and keep being creative with that, that's what I think they could do more of. Who knows what they're going to do with the movie, but, the times they've done like CG characters, sometimes didn't really, like the Timberwolves, they're all CG, in my opinion. They didn't really work out all that well, but they have improved them over the years. That's probably what we're going to see more of in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As far as color design goes, for the animation, they can use anything in the RGB color space. But how does that translate to the toys where you actually have to rely on dyes and inks to get the exact color?
That is a very good question, and one that would take me a very long time to explain. But that is the magic of color management. So in color, you have something called a gamut. The gamut describes all of the colors that you can show. And gamuts are a device-specific thing. This projector has a gamut. This laptop has a gamut. Your TV has a gamut. Movie projectors have a gamut. And a lot of times they're all different. They may ascribe to a standard. You might have heard of gamuts like sRGB, Adobe RGB. Those are all different ways of describing how many colors you can fit using RGB primaries. When you do printing in toys, those often use their own we call them primitives. It's basically the elements that produce all the colors. In RGB, the primitives are red, green, and blue. When you print, those primitives are cyan, magenta, and black. And translating between the two, they work in two different ways. RGB is often used in what we call transmissive, where you've got a backlight or a cathode ray tube or a projector that projects light, and the colors add together to produce white. Whereas in printing, it's called subtractive color. You subtract the color to produce white. And as you add all those colors together, they start turning into brown or black. And in order to translate those colors effectively, you either A, have to stick to a standard, like with Pantones, for example. You can say the Pantone is a company that produces the same color across multiple inks, dyes, objects. You say, I want Pantone 100. Oh, is that 10 minutes, I think? Okay, we've got 10 minutes left. So that describes to us, how it's going to work. And unfortunately, you can't reproduce all the colors in the same gamuts. Most CMYK gamuts are notoriously small compared to even sRGB, which is a very small RGB gamut. And even then, the RGB that your computer monitor can produce is not the same RGB gamut that a TV does. A TV uses one called NTSC. So you'll notice when they do TV production, they'll often have a monitor that is a TV attached so that they can proof their colors across two separate things. And of course, I'm immediately putting this entire room to sleep talking about this. But this is basically my job. That's what I do on a daily basis. I do color management amongst other things. And the short of it is that the way they stick to it is they try to stick to standards. They use color books. They say, I want Pantone 100 for this color. If you do that, they have that available in all sorts of dyes, inks, plastics, and so on. That's how they keep it consistent. So you've learned more today.
Hey, when it
hello.
When it came to, or when it comes to the general like demographic of a show, or even like the cartoons or the toys, is there like a color palette that they have to keep in mind, like not just pink and blue, but like pastel colors or soft?
I'm sure somebody has some direction somewhere. Usually, what happens is when that stuff is going on. You say you tell the artist the kind of feel that you want, and they might say we want pastels, and they'll go and they'll put a palette together for you. I would imagine that between at the time Lauren, Hasbro, and others, that those things were put together and said, hey, we want these kinds of colors. And if you actually look at the evolution of characters, you might see that they actually changed their colors over time. Because you guys might know that Pinkie Pie was originally not going to be Pinkie Pie. She was going to be Surprise, which was another Gen 1 pony, who was a white Pegasus with yellow hair. She morphed into Pinkie Pie over time, and all that stuff that was done for originally was thrown out. Twilight was going to be Twilight, but she was going to be a different palette entirely. She's still similar, but different. And that's those things that happen is somebody puts something forward, they say, do you like it, yes or no. Oftentimes, they have restrictions on what they can do. They say, we want to do these for toys, we have these things available, use what you've got in here, and an artist will put those together as combinations. But that's the basic gist of how something like that would work when they're picking those things.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
I'd like to ask you to speculate a bit. You talked about
Okay.
Gen 5 coming out sometime.
Okay.
And I'm always curious as to what would be some ideas as to why they would decide to switch to Gen 5. How many seasons
That's a
would
very
they
good
have
question.
of Gen 4? Would it be the popularity of Gen 4 goes down? Just your ideas on that.
At least my opinion on that front is, it's kind of like with Transformers. They decide every couple of years they want to sell new toys. And, what I think would cause them to go to a Gen 5 is if they started losing traction on the toy sales. They would say, okay, Gen 4 has they would say, Gen 4 has gone as far as it can go. It's time to do new toys. It's kind of different now because before Gen 4, they would have said, oh, we'll just do, 3 seasons and we'll syndicate it and we'll be done like they did with previous series. And that's what happened to Transformers Animated. They got to the end of their run and that was it. And they went on and started doing Transformers Prime, And Gen 4 is kind of an aberration on that front. It's gone on longer than I think any of them had expected it to. And people are still buying stuff. And if they can keep doing, those things, I mean, for them from an economic standpoint, from a mold standpoint, they're extremely happy if they can keep using those molds, they've amortized, just change colors and cutie marks and other things. But from what we could see in a Gen 5, I mean, it's a really tough call. Will they keep the same characters? I don't know. In my opinion, you need to have somebody like a Lauren who has the strength of creating characters and other things like that to really keep it going. And they have people on staff who I believe could do that. There's a lot of really talented people who are working on this show. In my opinion, the movie would probably be a good point to say, okay, Gen 4 has kind of run its course. They're not really writing Gen 4 in the sense of, the end goal. Otherwise, if they did, they wouldn't have made Twilight a Princess at the end of season 3. It would have gone on for a little longer than that. But this show has had a lot of, ups and downs in its production, and that's how it goes. In my opinion, I would like to see some new characters in Gen 5. I know a lot of people have been speculating, say, oh, Cutie Mark Crusaders, grown up. I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever, But I think there's a potential there for them to say the technology landscape for how they produce the show has changed since 5 years ago. And we would like to do something new. We'd like to try a new aesthetic. And I wouldn't begrudge them for that. I mean, I'm all about new aesthetics. If they can do something that's new and interesting, I'm all for it. We don't have to stay Gen 4 forever. At some point, it's going to end, guys. It's got to stop. Sorry. But, I believe that they've built up a lot of goodwill with Gen 4. And if Gen 5 has strong characters and a strong design, I believe people will stick with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. If that's all for questions, I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, and if you have any final words, just get this go. We have 3 more minutes.
Yep. Okay. Final words. I would say to everybody in this room, and perhaps people, the one person who will watch this on YouTube later, be good to each other. In the words of Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other. Have fun, enjoy the show. Please come to my booth and buy my stuff. I have laser light stands and posters and other things like that. This stuff pays for my dental work. My crowns don't go on my teeth by themselves. Now that I've got the commercial stuff over, it was really great doing the panel for you guys. It's great having a good audience here. You guys are great. You had great questions. Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed BronyCon this year. Hopefully, we'll be back again next year. I don't know if I'll do a panel or not. Occasionally we do vendor panels, like last year. I actually don't think I did a panel last year, but the year before that we did a vendor panel, and that worked out pretty well. I'm just running out of things to say here. You should go and buy all the comic artist stuff. You should go and buy the Art of Equestria book. I'm pretty sure there's people here who still have copies at the show. Like I said, I really like the show. If you like other shows, I'll give you my hit list. Watch Steven Universe. Who here watches Steven? Good. watch Adventure Time. We got our 1 minute warning left. Watch Star versus the Forces of Evil. It comes back tomorrow, so make sure you guys tune in for the season 2 premiere. We're gonna miss Wander Over Yonder, the Rest in Peace show, and that's really all I've got to say. So I will clear the stage for the upcoming panelist. If you guys want to see me, come to my table, table E15, and thank you for coming. Have a great BronyCon.